and I'm back for a brand new series, building a Les Paul Jr. style guitar from scratch. This time not from parts, we're building this from bits of wood. So if you enjoy it, please subscribe. If you're not enjoying it, please subscribe. Here it comes. All guitar projects start off with one major decision, a decision that's already been made for us, and that's scale length. The scale length on this guitar will be 24.75 inches. That's the standard length for a Les Paul Jr. Once we've established our scale length, the sort of process of building a guitar sort of relaxes a little. We don't need to get too uptight about it. As long as we get the scale length right and then we put the frets in the right place, this guitar will work. So we can all calm down. We just need to get these two pieces of mahogany, which have been book matched, and I've bought them as a two-piece body blank. I need to get these two stuck together as nicely as I can. So I really need to get them nice and flat on the edges that are going to meet. You need to turn the body pieces around until you know that they are matched correctly and that you've got a nice look to it, because that's the look that you're going to have to live with for the rest of the life of the guitar. So once we've established the orientation of the wood, we need to mark up which sides we're going to plane flat and get on and plane these as flat as we possibly can. Yeah, you've got to go from corner to corner in this cross shape, and I've got the light behind it and I can see that this is not flat, and I can see light here, so I need to work on that end, get it down. I think this end will come down, so I just need to take a little bit more off here. So I'm going to be taking tiny amounts off and adjust the plane just to take tiny shavings. There we go. Yeah, as much as that. That's pretty much there. Yep, just that tiny amount. Of course, to begin with, you might have to take quite a lot off. But as you get closer and flatter, you take less and less off. And just like that, that's pretty much there. So I'm pretty happy now that that side is as near flat as I think it needs to be. So, and it needs to be absolutely beautifully flat. Okay, so I'm going to move on to the other side. I'm going to make sure I pick up the right face, which is this one. That's why I've drawn the guitar on it. So this is the one that I need to get absolutely spot on. Now that's very close. You may get lucky. Your wood may turn up in great nick. It may turn up, you know, having been planed. This is actually very close indeed. An engineering square. Absolutely essential to make sure that your guitar body joint is absolutely square. You need to slide it up and down, looking for any light between the blade and the piece of wood. And that's looking pretty good throughout. So, Titebond, the best glue ever. I don't know anybody in guitar making who doesn't use this glue almost exclusively. I mean, you can use all sorts of things like fish glues and what have you, and I'm sure there's loads and loads of glues, hide glues, but for my money and a lot of people's money, this incredible glue is the only choice. And for gluing bodies together, I don't know why anybody would use anything else. Okay, when you're doing this, most important, spread it out. Don't use too much because you'll just be fighting with squeeze out, but use enough. Get it good and coated, and make sure you haven't got any dust or chips or anything in here. Little bits of offcuts and what have you. This has to be uncontaminated. Okay, I think I've probably put too much on here, so I'm going to use my handy scraper finger to get off the excess. So let's take a little bit off, wipe it on the bench. I'll clean that off in a second. I don't want it running all over the wood. Okay, now you only need to put it on one side, but what it is a good idea to do is to make the joint outside of your clamps, so you can get most of the squeeze out off. So I'm just going to press that down into place and then wipe my fingers up that to make sure that I'm just clearing the absolute worst of the squeeze out. Okay, cool. Now that's going to come apart again now, and I'm going to put that in my 4 clamps. Okay, I'll drop that in. I think the best way to approach this is to do the ends first and make sure you get in good contact. Once we've got this clamped up good and tight, we can probably leave this around 24 hours before we go back to it. We don't want any shift in this whatsoever, so it's best to leave it as long as you can. Just keep checking these ends to make sure they're nice and well aligned, and I'm really going to get some good pressure going here. Well, this is all looking pretty much as I'd hoped. It seems to be flat. I can't see any gaps at the top here, which is going to be on display, and the back looks pretty faultless as well. Maybe we can lose a bit of that down there. I cleaned it up as I went along. I like the way that the grain is sort of mirrored in there. I think that's extremely successful. Yeah, it looks nice, so I'm happy with that. So the next thing I would do normally is I would go straight on now onto the bandsaw and cut that out. But there's something that's been bugging me, is that we put a lot of faith in the templates that we buy, and I bought mine from Crimson Guitars, and they look absolutely right. But you know, it would be ideal if we had something to just to verify that the templates we're using are correct. Something like the original guitar would be great, but of course that's impossible. Or is it? I actually have a Les Paul Junior, which I bought many years ago, so this should be a good template. So what I did is I set about laying it over the templates as supplied by Crimson Guitars, and it's not absolutely bang on. If you're taking this as your template, the original guitar, or as near as damn as I can get to the actual original guitar, then it should all absolutely, you know, be fine. But it isn't. It's slightly out. This is a bit bigger than the template. And also something very strange happened. When I actually looked at the scale length on this isn't 24 3/4. It's wrong. But this is probably made from some of the original jigs that they used to make the original Les Paul Junior. So who's right? And the answer is nobody. And the fact is that I'm doing a stupid thing by trying to compare the templates that I've bought to the guitar that I own, because one of them's going to be different to the other, and which one is right. And it actually doesn't matter. What matters is that the templates or the pattern that you're using is absolutely correct. And the only thing that's absolutely critical in guitar making is the scale length and the relationship of the fret spacing to that scale length. If we get that right, we're home clean. But it is a conundrum, so I think the best thing I can do is to forget this and put it away. It's lovely. I'll play it later. Having checked a few things, I've discovered that this is a tiny bit thick. It's about, I don't know, about 2 millimeters too thick at the moment. But I'm going to leave that, because once I've cut this out, I can cut it down more easily. It's less wood to plane. So I'm going to leave all of that fine thicknessing until later. So the next thing I will do, now I will move on to cutting this out on the bandsaw. So here we go. It's the big cutout. I'm going to take this slowly. And if I don't feel confident, I'm just going to stop for a while, but you've got to take it careful. I don't want to snap this blade. tricky one. I need to get this blade out. There it is. Ha! And now I can just lift that off. Whoa, there we go. And that is the lion's share of the guitar cut out. I'm just going to take this bit. There's actually nothing quite as scary as a bandsaw. I mean, I'm not a great fan of power tools. They're scary things and they're sharp and dangerous at the best of times, but a bandsaw is on a different level. I mean, they're just scary, so be very careful. Some days when I come out and I start working, I just don't feel like it. I'm just not in the mood, and everything I seem to touch breaks or comes apart in my hand, or I drop things, and then if I press on that day, it's almost certain that I'm going to make a catastrophic error in the piece of work that I'm working on. And the trouble with building guitars is if you make that sort of error, you could ruin the whole thing. So sometimes just stop, go and have a cup of tea, sit down, watch a bit of telly, do whatever you want to do and come back to it later, or don't. Come back the next day or the next week, but come back when you're ready to do the work and you feel happy to do it and enjoy it. Anyway, let's crack on with the build. So now it's time to stick the template onto the top of the body blank that we cut out on the bandsaw. I've used some double-sided tape and I've made a nice little pattern all over the top. So I'm using a little X-Acto knife, a modelling knife, just to whip off these. I've had mixed success with double-sided tape. It used to be great and then it suddenly became very soft. I've tried to find decent double-sided tape and all I can get is this stuff. Anyway, I'll try it. Okay, very important, this has got to be lined up absolutely perfectly. That's looking pretty good. Absolutely critical, this, got to get it in the right place, and once you've got it, you've got to stick it down hard. Now, that seems stuck down nice and hard. I don't have a table router. I've just never been able to get on with them. So I'm going to use just a normal handheld power router and I'm going to work my way around with various bearing bits until it's all sorted out. So let's get on with that. Just be very careful with routers. They can really fly off and cause damage. So be careful. Here we go. So that's the first pass, which is not too bad. So the next thing to do is to keep going down from there, lower. But for that, I'm actually going to use a slightly bigger bit with a bit more depth to it. So I can go down maybe another ½ inch, and that will do for this side of the guitar. Get that good and tight. Okay. Right, well that's one side of it done. We've taken about 3/4 of an inch of material off the top. Now we've got to get the rest of it off. And what we do is we use what has been cut as a guide to cut the rest off. And for that we have what's called a bottom bearing bit. This bearing goes into this gully that we've already cut and it guides the tool to cut off the rest of the material. That's the theory, let's give it a go. Now that seems to be it. As far as I can tell, it's nice and smooth all the way around. Obviously we've got some clean up to do, but it looks to me like I seem to have a Les Paul Junior body cut out here, and I'm really chuffed about that. Once we've routed out our body, there's going to be some sort of marks on the side from the routing process that we need to get rid of. We want to get these sides beautifully flat, beautifully smooth. Now, instinctively, we all grab a piece of sandpaper and go at it hammer and tongs and get rid of them. And yeah, you can do that. The trouble with sandpaper, as I have often said, is that it can lead you astray. You can end up rounding things off. But more importantly, I think, it fills the air with dust, which in turn fills your lungs with dust. That's really bad news. It also is quite a violent way of attacking the grain of the wood. A far better way, I was taught at college, is use a cabinet scraper. A simple piece of hardened steel with an edge on it, which means you can take off these marks much faster and perfectly flat. I think you make better progress with a cabinet scraper, and I've got to be honest with you, I'd never even used one before I started my training. So get yourself a decent thickness, relatively stiff cabinet scraper, learn how to sharpen it and use that instead. You'll actually make better progress. And if you make acoustic guitars, there is nothing better for making tops and sides than these. So sharpening a cabinet scraper is as simple as sticking a block of wood up against it to keep it vertical, putting it on the top of your sharpening block, or in fact in this case a diamond block, and just taking it backwards and forwards until the top is flat. I mean, the block is just there to keep it vertical at 90 degrees to the sharpening surface. And then put it into a vise, like this, and then just take what's known as a burnishing tool and give it a couple of very short, not heavy strokes across that surface like this. And what that has done is created a burr on the edge, which makes it so sharp. And that is it. When it stops being effective, sharpen it. When you use it, put your two thumbs in the middle and you can bend it. And if you bend it, you change the shape of the blade at the front. Sometimes a really flat blade is what you want. Sometimes to bend it gives you just a slightly proud piece at the front, gives you a little bit more edge. Go across the grain, up and down the grain. Don't start me on that nonsense again. Do whatever feels effective and sharpen it again when it goes blunt. That's it. Well, that was part one. I hope you enjoyed it. I'm trying to make them a bit longer and a bit more in depth this time. Part two coming soon. We'll be kicking off with neck construction, and where it goes after that, I have no idea because I haven't shot it yet. I haven't actually made the guitar yet. So I hope to see you soon, and please subscribe.